Ονομάζομαι Ιωάννα Κωνσταντινίδου, θα κάνω τις συστάσεις στα ελληνικά, όμως θα κάνω τη βασική παρουσίαση στα αγγλικά, ελπίζω να είστε ok με αυτό. Όπως είπατε, είμαι ειδική παιδαγωγός και πιστοποιημένη αναλύτρια συμπεριφοράς. Ακούγομαι εντάξει, έτσι. Πάντα έχω να σκεφτώ. Οκ, τέλεια. Τα τελευταία 10 χρόνια δουλεύω στην βορειοδυτική Αγγλία. Συγκεκριμένα, διευθύνω το κομμάτι της ανάλυσης συμπεριφοράς σε μια δομή υποστηριζόμενης διαβίωσης για ενήλικες με αυτισμό. Επίσης, παρέχω υπηρεσίες ανάλυσης συμπεριφοράς στην Ελλάδα και στο εξωτερικό μέσω της σελίδας μου YouCan. Αυτή η εργασία που θα σας παρουσιάζω είναι κομμάτι της διδακτορικής μου εργασίας. Είναι μια συστηματική ανασκόπηση της βιβλιογραφίας που υποστηρίζει τη βασική μου εργασία που θα ολοκληρωθεί αυτή την άνοιξη, ελπίζω. So yeah, I will carry on presenting the main study in English. I hope that's okay. I hope I'll be okay on time, but if I don't, please give me a shout. So, yeah, this study will be on positive behavior support. It is a systematic literature review of the effect of staff training and organizational behavior management. So let's start. So to begin with, I'll give you some insight about positive behavior support, or else like PBS. So positive behavior support is a multi-component framework for supporting people with intellectual disabilities who engage in behavior commonly described as challenging. For example, like aggressive types of behavior or self-injurious behavior, property damage, to name some of them. PBS is one of many applications of the science of behavior analysis. So sometimes we find PBS as not being very behavioral, but for the purpose of this study, when we refer to PBS, it is referred as an application of the science of behavior analysis, and that's how we implemented it. So behavior analysis, like other natural sciences, has three interconnected branches: the conceptual analysis of behavior, the experimental analysis of behavior, and the application of the science. So ABA, applied behavior analysis. ABA, as we all know, is the science in which tactics derived from the principles of behavior are applied systematically to improve socially significant behavior, and experimentation is used to identify the variables responsible for behavior change. So PBS utilizes ABA-based procedures to focus on developing a functional assessment of the social and physical context within which challenging behavior occurs. Also focuses on the inclusion and involvement of key stakeholders, for example, family, friends. This is really important in PBS. It also focuses on developing, implementing, and evaluating the effectiveness of comprehensive person-centered systems of support. Quality of PBS services depends to an important extent on the skills of frontline staff. So if we have well-trained staff, it's more likely that the services that we're going to provide is of high quality. Staff in education settings usually are teacher-trained or receive training as teaching assistant. However, we don't find the same for residential staff. So sometimes they have in-house training or job training, but sometimes it's kind of like unofficial type of training. The quality and effectiveness of this training and the organizational behavioral management systems in place to ensure intervention fidelity directly affect service user outcomes. So again, if we provide high quality training and we have systems in place to reinforce this type of training, then it's more likely that we're going to provide services for people that lead to good outcomes for the people that we support. OBM, Organizational Behavioral Management, applies behavioral analytic knowledge to performance management, system analysis, and behavior-based safety. So we all know that the traditional kind of like train and hope approach doesn't really work. So if we train people and we don't have systems in place to reinforce this type of training, it won't really work. In contrast, there is evidence that behavioral skills training can be effective. So behavioral skills training is the type of training that we use to teach specific like interventions to staff, and it follows a specific approach. So usually we explain the theory, then we model the intervention, and then we give the opportunity to the person to practice the intervention until they are competent. However, there are a number of barriers For example, lack of measures to ensure intervention fidelity and a failure to ensure generalization of new skills across the team. So even if we provide good quality of training, there must still be like different reasons why the interventions are not followed in the way that they should be followed. McDonald et al. In 2018, they identified the need for a whole organizational approach to staff training. So what did they say? They did say that this approach doesn't only include behavior skills training for individual staff, it also includes the identification of effective OBM processes to ensure training leads to the desired outcome. So they really gave an emphasis on the systems. The impact of staff training on behavioral skills has been explored in a number of reviews and meta-analyses. Most of these studies focused on teaching specific behavioral intervention procedures rather than educating staff in an overarching scientific framework. For example, they focused on teaching like TTT, which is a discrete trial teaching. So what happens in our case, in our systematic review? And what is the rationale of our study? So we did see that the effectiveness of staff training commonly used procedures is relatively well documented. However, outcomes of clients regarding quality of life or reduction of challenging behavior are reported less often. And that's more the case for results on quality of life. There were really not enough studies that they reported on that. Furthermore, little was known about the OBM structures and the systems used to support effective long-term outcomes for staff training. So the objective of the present systematic review was to analyze outcomes of staff training in relation to overarching frameworks, PBS and ABA, and service user outcomes, and to assess the impact of different OBM systems. So I'm going to now present the methodology that we use for the systematic review. So let's have a look on the inclusion and the exclusion criteria. So in terms of what studies we included in our study. So we included in the review the studies that they were conducted in a social care setting for adults with intellectual disabilities. They also had to be peer-reviewed and published in English between 2000 and 2021. They had to describe staff training in PBS or ABA as an independent variable. They also had to report on outcomes for at least one of the following: quality of staff skills, quality of behavior support plans, and fidelity of implementation of intervention. So fidelity means actually if the intervention was carried out in the way that it should have been carried out. Let's have a look on the exclusion criteria as well. So studies were excluded if the independent variable of the study was training on only one specific behavioral procedure, if they described school-wide PBS or training for staff in formal school setting, if they described training for staff only in specific professional roles, let's say training for social workers or psychologists, if they described training of staff who already had qualifications in ABA, if they included parents training, or if there were systematic reviews, process reviews, and grey literature. So in terms of the screening procedures that we used, we did conduct our search of electronic databases like ERIC, PsycInfo, Web of Science in June 2021. And we used the following search terms. You can see. The search methods used in the review were based on the preferred reporting items for systematic reviews and meta-analysis, Prisma. So we'll have a look. So as you see, in the research that we conducted, we found initially 2,188 studies. So what we did after that, we removed the duplicates, and after removing them, we had 2,056 studies. Then we carry on different processes of screening. So we excluded different studies in the title screening, then we excluded other studies on the abstract type of screening, and then in the end, we had 24 studies for full text screening, and we found 5 more as a result of backwards and forward search. Then in the end, after we conducted full text screening in these stage, we included 9 studies that met our inclusion criteria in our systematic review. So in terms of what we analyzed after we found these 9 studies, let's have a look on the categories that we used. So first of all, we extracted information on the general and demographic information about staff training. So some information about the training, the length of the training, the participants as well. We also analyzed type of outcomes and measurement systems for staff over behavior. So, for example, this type of outcomes were knowledge on PBS or ABA, skills, staff skills, or quality of support. And we measure like quality of support, for example, through fidelity of implementation of PBS plans or through quality of plans. We also analyzed organizational systems in combination with training. So we're going to have a look on the categories that we use for analyzing this type of systems. So we used the different categories and we adapted them from Gravina et al. 2018. So in terms of the antecedent-based strategies that were in place before or at the beginning of the training, so we had the assessment. So if assessment was used before or during the training for staff in supervisory roles, clarification of responsibility for generalization of learning across the whole team. So if there were people that participate in the training, that they were being told that actually you have the responsibility to teach to your colleagues the things that you're going to be taught. Also, we had other antecedent-based strategies, like, for example, prompts. So there was the category for other outcomes as well. Then we had the consequence-based strategies. So in terms of that, we had the monitoring feedback systems. And we also had, like, again, other consequences-based interventions. Another thing that we extracted information for was the overall quality of the studies that was assessed using the Rayhouse and all evaluative method. So with this evaluation instrument, we actually measure the research rigorous, we assess the quality of the study. So we did assess different quality indicators, and in the end, what we wanted to see after that, we wanted to see the strength of the research. So we were able to say if a study was strong, if it was adequate, or if it was weak. So let's have a look on the results. How much time do I have? 10 minutes is okay. Cool. So in terms of the general information, we found that the studies reviewed include a total of 876 members of staff, including managers and frontline staff, as well as 202 analysts with intellectual disabilities. The training was carried out mainly in large-scale statutory and voluntary sector residential settings, located in the community most, and less in hospital settings. The main training methods were pyramidal style, type of like train the trainers. So I'm going to train some people to train the others, with some of the programs focusing on staff skills development, while others focus on system-wide interventions. So different type of interventions in the whole organization. Most of the training was relatively short, but we did have some types of training that they lasted for like 9 to 12 months as well. So let's have a look on the staff skills outcomes. So the impact of training on staff skills was assessed through the quality of behavior support plans in 4 studies, the implementation of behavior strategies or behavior support plans in other 4 studies, and the quality of support in 2 studies. The studies that reported on the quality of behavior support plans used 3 different evaluation systems, as you see, and 3 studies included 2 outcome measures each. To evaluate the fidelity of implementation of behavior strategies and intervention plans, 4 of studies used the periodic system review. The quality of support, of staff support was reported in 2 studies, and other competence-based skills were reported in 2 studies. Sorry, I'm not going very in-depth because I won't really have time to do that. Most studies that explicitly focused on staff outcomes reported improvements, which is really good. So most of the studies reported at least 1 improvement, but most important, more than 1. So again, I have some more details on that, which you can have access to if you want. Service user outcomes now. So in terms of the impact of that training on the people that receive support, which is really important, right? So obviously we provide training for the staff, but what is the end result? We really want to see an improvement on the people that we support. So service user outcomes with regards to the reduction in challenging behavior were reported in 5 studies. Only 3 studies reported on changes in residents' quality of life, and 1 study reported on changes in mental health. So, in terms of the result on organizational behavior management systems, 5 studies evaluated the use of 2 antecedent OBM strategies. McGill et al., for example, used 3 antecedent strategies, while 2 studies reported only 1 antecedent strategy, for example, training supervisors. So, it's training supervisors, again, to train the rest of the team. From those studies, only 1 did not report the use of consequence-based OBM strategy. So all of the other strategies did use consequence type of intervention as well, together with the antecedent type of strategy. So Marquez et al. Was the only study, that did not describe any organizational supporting systems in place to assist with the staff training outcomes. However, this study only lasted 1 day, right? So the training that was provided only lasted for 1 day. So it was a really brief type of training. Training staff for their supervisory roles generally is considered part of a system-wide staff training process. And this was reported in all studies, again, except from Marquez et al. So what we observed in the study is we observed that most of them, they provided training for the supervisors. And the reason that they did that was, again, to ensure that the supervisors would be able to train their colleagues, their teams, in order to generalize the training outcomes. The responsibility to generalize training outcomes within the team was described in 5 studies in different ways. So apart from training supervisors, sometimes we did see that trainees were being given the responsibility to also generalize the outcomes to their team. So what does that mean? So when people participate in the study, they were being told that after we finish with the training, you have to actually go back and teach your colleagues, teach your team. Consequence-based systems that included monitoring and feedback were reported in 7 of the studies, and this included monitoring performance, evaluating intervention fidelity, or mentoring regarding specific staff behaviors as part of maintenance procedures. So in terms of the consequence-based systems that they were observed, together with training, what did we see? We saw different systems in place to monitor the results of the training, so to see if the results were actually implemented, different types of providing like feedback to the team, different types of like monitoring performance. Another approach to monitoring performance and delivering performance-based feedback was reporting in one of the studies by Reed et al., who trained supervisors to conduct evaluative observations and provide feedback and performance-based staff training. Another example is Haberlin et al. That instructed the pyramidal training group of supervisors to deliver performance-based feedback, while the direct care staff group did not receive this training. Only 2 studies reporting on OBM outcomes. So in terms of our organizational type of outcomes, we only have like 2 studies that are important on them. For example, Grace and Spicer found that the priority of referrals reduced from 100% priority 1 in the first year of training to 25% after training. Taking the time. The 2 studies that applied the pyramidal training the trainer model described at least 1 positive target outcome for staff. Again, that's quite positive. Other studies that used supervisor training reported less effect. McGill et al. Was the only study that used more than 2 antecedent-based strategies. The only organizational system used by Wardale was to include trainees in supervisor roles along with other staff. And McKenzie, again, did not report any organizational systems to support staff training. So in terms of the social validity, again, social validity was reported by most of the studies, and the outcomes were quite positive for all the studies, although different measures were used to measure social validity. So actually, how effective was the training to improve the quality of life for the people. In terms of the quality of the studies, that's actually quite important, very interesting. So the overall quality of the studies that was assessed again using the Rayhouse model found the following. So one only study from the 9 was rated as strong and one as adequate. So these studies reported good inter-observer agreement, good levels of generalization and maintenance, and high levels of social validity. The remaining 7 studies out of the 9 were rated as weak due to an unacceptable score for at least one of the primary indicators. So that's actually quite interesting.
You have 2 minutes at your disposal.
I think I'll be okay. Thank you. So in terms of some quite important points that they are part of the discussion, so what did we saw in the study? Although we did see that it was really hard to extract information and analyze the data. And the reason for that, it was that there was a lot of variability in terms of the language that was used, the variety of training methods, the OBM systems, and outcome measures as well. However, we did see that the training overall had positive effect on staff knowledge and practice skills, especially with regards to developing and implementing behavior support plans. Only a few studies including specific behavioral residential outcomes or more general residence quality of life measures. So not all of the studies reported on the outcomes for the people that they received support. This lack of focus on residents was particularly conspicuous in the context of PBS that claims that they're really person-centered and they obviously focus on providing a good quality of life for the people that they receive support. The studies that reported positive outcomes consider mainly a reduction in challenging behavior. Measurable improvements with regards to quality of life were not demonstrated, although it was not clear whether this was due to inclusion criteria in this review or the difficulties in measurement, lack of attention to detail, or lack of progress. A number of OBM processes were utilized in the studies. This included antecedent as well as consequence-based procedures. Generally, we found many studies that included the train-the-trainer approach that seemed to work well. But a number of questions still remain. So, for example, we didn't have enough studies that they were really strong in terms of the methodology. They didn't describe a lot of data so that the studies would be able to be repeated. And we didn't have this, in-depth or inside details to be able to know exactly, for example, what kind of the responsibility the staff were given to generalize the outcomes to the remaining of the team. With regards to the evaluation of the strength of the studies, it is important to remember that this kind of research is conducted in residential settings where the strict criteria such as randomization and planning commonly are impossible to achieve. So that might be something else important to consider. So, yeah, I think I'm done. I see that I don't have any more time. And in the end, I just want to mention that this is a systematic literature review that supported my study that I'm finishing this year. So hopefully next year I'll be able to present the results of my main study as part of my thesis. And, yeah, thank you all.
Okay, ευχαριστούμε πολύ.